Hey everybody, this is Heather and Jenny with Surviving Darkness, and we are on episode 43.
Okay.
Sorry, Jesse's not here, so I was just making sure that it was working.
I was like, okay, we are on episode 43.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
just looking and making sure that everything was working since our sound man's not here. Sorry. Okay,
we're on
good.
episode 43, Squirrel.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just making sure because, like we said, that one time we recorded for a whole hour and nothing showed up and we weren't paying attention that it wasn't on there. So just making sure. Yeah. So we kind of figured that today we would talk about our brother.
Yes.
And those circumstances there.
Yeah, and it's weird because you had texted in the middle of the night and you were like, I think the next episode we need to talk about him and might need to write stuff down and like make notes. And I had no clue that you had texted because it was like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And the next morning I got up and saw the text, but through that night, I was having the worst nightmares, and Raj woke me up twice because of it. I mean, it was bad. So I don't know. I guess the devil didn't want us to talk about that. Yeah. I don't know, for whatever reason.
Do you remember any of your dreams at that time or not?
It's always possessed people. There was a girl like in behind a door, and from the doorway, all I could see was her feet like hanging, like she was behind the door, but all I could see was black pants and feet, like black shoes. But I knew it was a possessed kid, so I was trying to say Jesus, and it wasn't coming out, so I was screaming Jesus. But before that, I'm not sure exactly. It was like I was somewhere in the atmosphere was evil, and I was like praying in tongues or something, and I woke up, or he woke me up because I was like yelling, praying in tongues.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just weird.
So what made me think that and we've been talking about doing it for several weeks. We've even said on here that we were going to do that. But what made me be like, okay, yeah, it was kind of, I guess, my sign, you would say. You know, I watch ID channel a lot when my little guy is not around. I don't watch it with him. So a lot of times during the night when I don't sleep the best, I have it turned on. And so the episode that I was watching, they had done all the cyber tracing and things like that and found, and I'm sure that you can find this article on the internet, but it was a nurse, and he and his wife both were nurses and had been, worked in the medical field for years. I can't remember. I'm thinking he had been like a nurse for 30 years. And so he and his wife worked for the suicide awareness or suicide hotline, not suicide awareness, but suicide hotline, which is when people are feeling, trying to get help because they're feeling suicidal. So they're calling in to get help. And two of the people he had talked with, he had actually made like a suicide pact with them to where they would both commit suicide. Like he and this other person he was talking to would do that. But obviously he did not do his side of it. But he was researching like what they had done wrong in order for it to not be accomplished. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And he was looking up things like the one girl had hung herself and tried to hang herself and something happened. And I didn't see that part, whether, like the rope broke or whatever. I didn't see that part. But anyway, he was giving her pointers on basically how to make sure that it would happen this time. And they were going to do it together, like wherever he was. And I think she was in Canada. But anyways, they were going to do it at the same time. And well, he had no intention of doing it. But if I'm not mistaken, and I may have to look that up, I think he even stayed on the phone to be able to listen and hear what was going on.
Oh, so
He
he
was sick.
yeah, so he got enjoyment from someone
Yes.
killing themselves.
Yes. And that was 2 victims that they knew about.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's when I watched that, I was like, that takes a demented person to want to hear somebody do that.
Right.
It was like that big case where that teenage girl talked her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend into, killing himself, and he died by carbon monoxide poisoning. And she just told him that if he was going to do it, then he needed to go ahead and do it.
Right.
How do you do that to somebody? Not just because we had a brother who was a victim of suicide, but how do you do that to somebody and think that that's okay to be like, oh yeah, just go ahead and do it? Because there's basically no way that I could ever have somebody call me and me talk them into doing that to themselves.
No.
That could never cross my mind. Even if I didn't think that they were really serious about it, I wouldn't say, oh, well, you just go ahead and do it. I'm tired of hearing about it. You know, I mean, how do you do that?
I don't know.
And then when you're in the medical field, especially a nurse, you're supposed to be caring for people. And if you get that hardened to stuff, you need to be just out of it. But his wife knew nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. They cleared her. Like, she had a breakdown when she found out what he was doing. She had no idea about the things that were going on.
I would too.
And I can't imagine that part either, is thinking you live with this person and you thought you knew them, and, to find that out, you think you're joining forces to help people when you're not.
Right. Yeah, he's talking people into killing themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if people just go into that field for the wrong reasons, or if they just get hardened because of the things that they see in the field. I don't know. I don't know how anybody can go flip the switch that much.
Mm-mm.
Go from, well, then you have like what is it, angel of death or whatever, was in like the hospitals, like killing people.
Mm-hmm.
Killed a lot. I mean,
there was at least 10 victims at that one veteran hospital.
Right.
And she was injecting them with insulin.
Right.
And killing them.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Because even if I didn't have medical background, and I'm sure you felt the same way, if there was somebody in dire circumstances, I would, or dying, I would try my best to help them.
I just wonder if it's like a God complex. I control life or death.
Mm-hmm. It could be.
I don't understand it. But yeah, I guess we were going to carry that into.
Yeah, that's kind of what made us say, we had mentioned it several times that we were going to talk about him. And then it was kind of like, okay, yeah, we need to, because that was just something that was in my face as, okay, now, now's the time. Plus his birthday is coming up, know, and
it's not, I'm not going to say it's a touchy subject. We just want to word things to where nobody is really offended. I mean, we're not like
pointing fingers at people directly
and causing or trying to cause issues with anybody or make anybody look bad or anything like that. So it was like, how do we want to approach it? But he did a lot of stuff to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it we didn't know until after he was gone, but he was abusive. He was physically, sexually abusive to people.
Mm-hmm.
And he was abusive to us growing up. And, but it's hard. Like, I mean, we had our dad and other people that did stuff, and it was like, there's so much anger and animosity towards them, but not so much him. And I don't know. I don't know if it's that sibling bond. And then as we got older, it was like he had the addiction and it was almost like we outgrew him. Like he was the little baby brother instead of the big brother. And almost like we had to protect him. And it was just, it was a weird dynamic. And it's hard even now for me to be like, I don't know why I don't have the animosity towards him that I did the other people, because what he did hurt too.
I think a lot of it with me, I can't speak for you, is that I know a lot. I mean, we know a lot of what he went through also. Things came out over the years about some of the stuff that he had gone through at a young age. And I mean, there were issues with the parents, they weren't together.
Right.
They had divorced, and, so he was kind of back and forth. He would, lived with us all the time during the week, and then would go visit with his mom. And then there are a lot of people in and out of his lives out there. And then the one that ended up being a stepdad was, oh my gosh, I don't even know the word for him. Like, he was out of his mind too.
Yeah, he was crazy.
Yeah. And he would torture him,
Right.
And we don't know if there was any sexual abuse with him, but at the same time, I would not be surprised if there was,
Yeah.
I mean, he would put him under the house and lock him under the house all day long, and he told me it was like there were rats and everything under there, and it was dark under there, and I was under there until he decided to let me out.
Right.
So I knew that part and knew that he had gone through a lot of that stuff with him. So,
and the stepdad was our dad's cousin. So once our dad found out what all he was doing to our brother, he did put his foot down and be like, if you mess with my son again, it's going to be bad.
mm-hmm.
So he did take up for him,
and he ended up being the one that shot
dad's ex-wife.
Yeah, and
our brother's mom.
Yeah. And I about said his dad, I meant his mom. And she lived through it, but I mean, he still knew all of that too. And if he's capable of doing that, you don't know what all what all our brother went through there
with him
too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Dad said he was pretty cruel growing up, killing animals and stuff like that. He was just a cruel person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because he ended up shooting another wife and stabbing another one, right?
He shot the one and stabbed another.
Oh, okay. That's right.
He stabbed her like 17 times and thought he killed her.
Yeah.
He didn't manage on that one either. I mean, it's not funny, but it's like, really?
Yeah.
They weren't meant to die.
No, they were not. No.
But he tried. I mean,
yeah, he did.
Both times were with the intent.
Mm-hmm. And basically, our brother's mom was, like you say, it just wasn't her time because it
right
should have been.
Right.
So, and like you say, I think knowing that he didn't have a close bond with our dad either, because our dad was too busy doing his own thing, and he never wanted him to go along with him. Even when Mom would mention, "Why don't you take him for the weekend or go fishing or something like that?" No, I don't want to go. He doesn't need to go with me. And
that's because he had plans to go drink and shoot pool and things like that a kid doesn't need to be at.
Right.
So it was
hindering him.
Hindering his fun for the weekend.
Yeah.
Or for the night. He when he left the house, it was with every intention of going and getting into something, even though that wasn't what he said he was going to do, but that's what he was going to do.
Yeah.
So that's why he didn't.
So he didn't have a stable growing upbringing.
Right.
He really didn't.
There for a while, from what I understand, like I said earlier, I don't want to say anything to cause any issues or point fingers or anything like that. This is just the things that we were told. His mom was sort of scared of that stepdad and knew some of the things that he was doing to our brother, so she wouldn't get him. Like if the stepdad was in a bad mood or something like that, she wouldn't get him. So our brother felt sort of deserted by his mom, and then he lived with a dad who really didn't want to spend time with him or teach him anything. He didn't want to invest in him.
Mm-mm.
So,
and he was raised, our mom took him like a son and raised him as her own,
right,
not trying to take the place of his mom. It wasn't anything like that, but he lived with us.
Right.
But she also had 2 other kids that were younger, and she had, all of that stuff to do like a mom does.
Right.
And so, it was just hard. And then you hear about the things that he did to other people in the family or people even outside of the family that were wrong.
Right.
And caused issues mentally for those victims. And, I feel really bad, and I do get upset that they went through that at his hands.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, that anger is not there like we have with our dad and everything.
And
too.
I don't know if it was because we knew all he went through or if he was that good at manipulating situations. Yeah. Because, like, we would be in big old fights, and he would have had put pillows over my head, tried to suffocate me, everything else. But when it came time for mom or dad to be home, I'm so sorry. Don't say anything. Please don't say anything, because I'll be in deep trouble. So then it was like it was put on us yet again.
Right.
Whether he got in trouble or not. So if he got in trouble, then it would be our fault, not what he did. So even young with dealing with him, it was sort of, let me put the ball in your court. You get to decide whether I'm going to be in trouble or not.
And it kind of is like that with your siblings, like you say, you'll fight and everything like that. But it's like, oh, don't say anything. Don't say anything. And normally you don't. You just don't. It's kind of like a friend thing, too. Yeah. You don't want them to get in trouble. But at the same time, what they're doing, they should have gotten in trouble for or whatever, And
I just thought he was the coolest, and I was such a tomboy, and I just wanted to be like my brother.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was all into sports and all that stuff, but I don't know. I don't know the real reason behind the lack of animosity.
Mm-hmm. I know, because like we talked about before we got on here, with me, it wasn't as big of an issue. Didn't do as much to me, even physically. I know, like he would torture you. Like,
he tried to drown me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Over my head, all kinds of stuff.
But he didn't do that to me. He only did like 1 or 2 things to me, and then Dad told him, basically, she's way younger than you, because he was 10 years older than me. So when he was 15, 16. Bullying you, he was trying to do that to me, and I was 5 or 6. There was a huge difference, So, and even though a lot of things he was doing to you should never have been allowed to happen, I guess they figured you were old enough to kind of take up for yourself. But they probably didn't even know that he was holding you under in the pool and letting you have very few breaths in between. I mean, like. Because I don't think that would have been allowed. But maybe they just weren't even aware of all that too. Yeah. So, like we've talked before, there was so much infighting in the family and stuff like that it's hard to be aware of all the other stuff that's going on. So, not making it right. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying he was a good-hearted person. I think that was a lot of it too. He was good-hearted and was tender-hearted, but at the same time, he could be cruel. And so you were kind of scared of what would he do. When you were telling me about him holding pillows over your face and him pulling you back and forth in the pool and everything, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that would have terrified me. And to him, it was just a joke, but I don't know that I could do that to somebody. I mean, like, you were mean to me, but
I just broke your cracker. It'll be okay.
But we also just were sisters and just fought, but you didn't try to kill me, I don't think.
No. No.
I'm sure there were times you wanted to, but you didn't
Yes.
actually like act upon it.
No.
So, but it was weird because at the same time, he would do whatever, and I guess that's just the whole sibling thing. He would do whatever to us, or to you, but if anyone else would have done that, he would have laid into him.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. He took up for me
So
quite a bit when people would bully. But I don't know if it's because of the sibling thing or he got to bully, because it was usually people that were like bigger than me but younger than him.
well, yeah, that's true.
So I don't know if it was a power trip on his part, or if it was actual, I'm taking up for my little sister.
Right. That's true. Yes. Yeah. And then with me, when it comes to like the inappropriateness, there was, just one time that anything happened with him personally, and I was young, and then he was kind of, I guess you'd say, an instigator as far as one of the very first people that ever did anything to me, because it was basically like he was wanting to mess with the sister of this guy. So in order to make it okay, the brother had to mess with me.
Right.
I don't know if obviously there was something crazy in that thought process. I don't understand that at all. I really just.
And then after he was gone, we found out of other people that had been messed with that I had no clue. I didn't know.
No. And especially one of them we would have never known about. We wouldn't have known about him had we all not started talking about things a couple years ago. And
Right.
he wouldn't have ever said anything. And I was kind of blown away that something had happened with him.
Right.
So.
Because we didn't think that there was guys involved.
No.
So it definitely caught me off guard.
Yeah. Yeah, because we found out that someone that we knew a couple of them were a victim of him. And like you said, we did not know or suspect anything like that at all.
No.
Yeah, kind of makes you wonder, like, where did that come from?
Right. I think it was just a control.
Yeah.
Control and he had bully tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
But he only bullied those that he thought he could get by with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as we got older, he quit bullying us because he actually got a little scared of us. He's like, I made him mean, I'm going to leave him alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wondered, like, why? Why is he so different than everyone else? And I think it is sort of, as we got older, it was more of a need to take care of him because he had the alcohol problem, and I don't know, it was almost like he was broken.
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, maybe that brokenness was because of guilt of the things he had done that we didn't even know anything about.
Right. I think it was just a combination of everything, of what he'd gone through, not just as in the abuse, but the divorce and everything like that. And, everything with his parents and that instability there. And then,
never feeling like he measured up with Dad.
Mm-hmm.
He was never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had so many issues. Like when he was drinking, he was so mean.
Yeah.
Like so aggressive. But
he saw that
growing up. Right.
Because that's what would happen when our dad came in?
Yeah.
Didn't make it okay for him to
No.
carry it on, not by any means whatsoever. But he did see that, you know?
Right.
So.
And at the time growing up, we thought that Dad was beating on Mom.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know until after we were grown and all that it was actually Mom letting him have it.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was, yes.
So.
Yeah.
But we just assumed, any hitting or any noise like that sounded like hitting was Dad hitting Mom.
Mm-hmm.
But we found out later on that wasn't so much the case. I mean, he threw stuff around and acted like an idiot, but it wasn't so much that. But our brother did wind up being abusive in his relationships, especially when he was drinking. And not saying it's okay, but that's what he saw.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
His
why there's so
wife,
many things.
He was really mean to her, really mean. I remember going in one day and we all were there, and she had one of the little air casts on her ankle. And it said something about she twisted her ankle or something happened. And finally our dad was like, that's not what happened. And she told him that he had kicked her.
Right.
And
right.
So.
Yeah. He was pretty mean when he was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
He would buck up even against Dad and stuff like that. I don't know, I guess that's when what they call it, liquid courage. That's when his courage kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I mean, even then, even when he was doing wrong, I mean, I didn't care to tell him, you know what, you're screwing up. You need to stop. But I still felt sorry for him. I was like, you're going to lose everything you've got. And I think I cared more about him losing his family and everything he had than what he cared.
He did, yeah. Because he lived with me at one point for close to a year. And, he knew he was not allowed to drink at my house. Not at all. And I was helping him because I would get his kids, even before he lived with me, I'd get them on the weekends sometimes when they were allowed to come over. And so, yeah, whenever I found out that he was drinking, and that was the stipulation, they could come down and they could see him at my house as long as I was there. They were at my house. They didn't leave and go anywhere with just him, and he was not drinking. And so I had seen their relationship starting to mend and get better. And then when I found out he was drinking again, I was so mad. And I put him out that night, and I guess it was about 2 weeks later, he came back to get his stuff, and he was like, I've never seen you that mad at me, ever. He said, I thought for sure you were going to hit me. And I said, if you would not have left that night, it would have been bad. Because all I could think about was your kids and what you were putting them through again. So yeah, like you said, you're losing it all again for something that you're letting have this much control over you. Mm-hmm. But then we didn't know about the whole bipolar and everything like that too. And that's not an excuse for anything. But once he did get that diagnosis and did kind of realize that there was something going on, it did help him to deal with the alcoholism better. Yeah. He was able to stay sober longer periods of time.
Right.
There were still a lot of slip-ups, but for the most part, when he would get sober, he was able to stay sober longer. Before he took his own life, he had been sober for 3 years.
Right.
That was a very long time
for him.
Yes. And, so that, but then again, I don't know, did he not have those nurturing feelings towards his kids because he didn't have that nurturing?
I don't know. That's possible.
I mean, from our mom, but not from his own parents.
Right.
So did he just feel like whatever when it came to his kids? I mean, it's just a rhetorical question because obviously we'll never have the answer as to how he felt about that.
Right. And when kids are that little and they go through traumatic events, period, that's during the time that their personalities are forming and everything else. So he may not have had that love and not that ability to
Mm-hmm.
love
Mm-hmm.
correctly instilled in him
Mm-hmm.
at that young age when the personality and stuff is developing.
And I still think that what makes it so hard for me about when he did take his own life was the fact that he had so much going for him in his life. He had his kids back in his family. Yes, they were grown. They had kids, but he, so he had his grandkids around, and he was so happy with all of them, with everything. And one little mistake.
He thought all that happiness was going to be gone.
Yeah. Yes. And that was the only decision that he had to make, was to take his own life. And his kids were really upset with him over that too. And they were very mad, because we were just getting to a really good spot again.
Right.
And you did this.
Right.
And I can understand them being really angry about that.
Right.
Because they had seen all of the bad stuff for all of those years and everything, and did not have a good relationship with him at all. If they had any. I mean, for 2 years, we didn't even know if he was alive.
Right. We didn't hear from him.
No.
For long periods of time, at a time.
Yeah.
We didn't, we wouldn't know where he was, which state he was possibly in. It was like we expected to get phone calls that they found him in a ditch somewhere, because we had no clue.
And I still think I don't guess it's funny, but just ironic, was when the bill collector called, because they had, Dad and our brother had
the same first name, but different middle.
Yeah. And asked my mom where he was, and she was like, we don't know. And they were like, you don't know where your son is? She was like, no, we really have no idea where he is. Well, I just can't believe that. She was like, well, you don't have to believe it, but I'm telling you, we have not heard from him. We do not know where he is. And that was a true story.
Right.
So, but then there were times, and I remember, I still you were still at home too. I think you were in college. No, maybe you were still in high school. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he had moved back home and was trying to do better, and he might have gotten you something that Christmas too. I don't know, but I collected the Christmas bears, the year bears. And he had gotten one, and it was on my bed when I came in from something, and it had a little note with it saying, I love you, and I just wanted to get this for you. And I still remember that, and I still have the little note that came with it too.
Right.
Because he was good-hearted, and and I think that's another reason that made it hard. Made it easy to not just hate him.
Right.
Right. If that makes sense. Because we did see the good part of him too. When he wasn't drinking.
Right. The cutting up and all of that.
And we still laugh about when he would call. He was the only brother we had, and he would call, hey sis, it's your brother, and he'd say his name, and we're like, you don't have to say your name.
Right.
We only have one brother, and we know your voice.
And it was like that hesitation. Hey sis, it's your brother. And then like a few seconds later, he'd tell us his name, and I'm like, oh wow, that brother. Yeah, the only one I got. Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Yeah, and we'd even
I'm glad you specified which brother, seeing as how I only have one.
Yes.
But yeah, I had that. I do miss that. Those phone calls. Yeah, it's just having to process it, and just, I don't know, when we were doing that one episode, and I'm like, I don't understand why we don't have the anger and stuff towards him that we have of the other people that abused us. I mean, I think
too, because he was not supposed to be our protector. He was, because he was the oldest. But at the same time,
he wasn't an adult.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get
But
at.
then the one other person with you wasn't an adult either.
No.
Is it because he wasn't a blood relative? Because they were close to the same age.
They were. Yeah, they were.
So I'm like, that's why it's all so confusing. It was like, you absolutely can't stand him.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, that's why it's also,
I guess, because,
confusing. Because he's the one that actually did stuff.
and then in my mind too, I'm like, how could you let yourself be manipulated into thinking that that's okay too?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, I couldn't have let myself do that.
Right.
So there had to have been a tendency there,
Right.
period, for the one that did that to me to think that he would even want to do something like that with a 5 or 6 year old.
Right.
Because I don't care what you were my older sister, but I don't care what you'd say to me if you tried to have me do something like that. I'd be like, what? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Or if one of my friends made me do that, or tried to make something. No, sorry. No, you're on your own.
Right.
If you're wanting to do something as sick as that, you go right ahead. However, I am not doing that.
Right.
And maybe that's what it was, There for a long time, I did blame our brother too for it, because I was like, you initiated things.
Right.
But I don't fully remember all the circumstances either with what led up to exactly how things happened. I just remember what happened. And that our brother was doing something with this guy's sister and was, so I don't remember like conversations. I don't remember anything like that either. So I don't know if what I'm saying, maybe, like he talked him into that or whatever. I don't know if that's what happened. I don't remember if, do you know what I'm trying to, like, I don't know what led up to how it happened with me. I just remember what technically was going on.
Right.
So maybe that's why I don't have as much animosity towards him in that circumstance too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that he was there. I know that I'm sure he was to blame for it too.
Right.
Because I would have stopped, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I don't know. And maybe that's why I don't hate him for that part of it. And maybe why I felt so much anger towards the other person. Because in my mind, they had their own mind.
Yeah.
It's weird. I know. That's why I was like, we don't know. We don't know. We just don't know how we feel and why we don't feel that anger and hatred towards him, and I don't understand it either.
Right.
Even the ones that we were victimized, who we think that there could have been like the demonic presence that had influenced them. There's no love lost there at all. No. And I don't feel anything towards that person except for you deserve what you got.
Right.
And there could have been extenuating circumstances with that. Very possibly. But at the same time, I guess I feel like you're also the one that kept coming back.
Right.
I don't
and
know.
Maybe
There's so many
that's part of it too, because what happened, I think he was genuinely sorry because it stopped.
Right.
I mean, I think whatever happened with him may have been once or twice, and that's it with our brother. Mm-hmm. And he was genuinely sorry.
And I was young.
The behavior stopped.
Yeah, I was very young.
Whereas the other, it was so much manipulation, and the behavior never really stopped.
No.
There wasn't that remorse.
No.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe
and
it
with
was
him
remorse.
Too, I just remembered this. When things started coming out about you and I, and he said he didn't remember even, he only touched me once, and he said he didn't even remember that, which is possible.
Mm-hmm.
He may have been drunk when he came in. I don't know. I was young. I don't remember. I know exactly where I was. I know it happened because I know exactly what I was wearing. I know exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But he did come in drinking a lot then,
Mm-hmm.
because he wasn't already, and he said that he was already partying and an alcoholic at 17.
Right. Yeah.
So
and he was
have,
working
yeah.
at like 15, 16 years old and coming in at midnight.
Yeah.
Later.
And so, I mean, it is possible that he didn't
Right.
remember.
That is possible.
But when everything came out, and I just told him one day, because he was, I don't remember that. And I felt like it was almost like he was trying to do what Dad did, was saying, oh, I don't think I was responsible for anything. That's not what he said. I'm just saying, when he and I were talking on the phone, because I had mentioned, well, what about this with Heather, and what about this? And he was like, I don't know. And then he was like, I feel like you're just so mad at me. And I was like, I am. I said, and there are things that you need to talk to Heather about too, and you need to apologize to her about. And I hung up. And I even told my husband, I walked outside because our neighbor was there. And I said, if he ever calls back here, I am not here, and you do not let him talk to me. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was so mad over everything, because
Mm-hmm.
that's, everything had come out about what he had done to other people.
Right.
And I was mad at him. And at that point, I did not care if I spoke to him ever again. I had lost all respect for him.
Right.
I did not care what happened. I didn't care if I spoke to him,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment, I did have a lot of anger and hatred towards him. And I didn't care one way or the other as far as he was concerned. But then we were able to talk. I don't remember. It was, a little bit later, and it was face to face, and I could see his sincerity in his apology.
Right.
And maybe that's why I felt like I did forgive him. And, now, and maybe that's why I don't feel as much anger or,
right.
Whatever towards him.
Right.
And I remember him saying on the phone, he said, I remember Heather trying to get help for what was going on with her, with our dad. He said, I never knew anything about you. Mm-hmm. And I said, nobody would have. Had all this other stuff not start coming out, no one would have known anything. Mm-hmm. And he started crying, and he said, if I would have known, if I would have even known definitely for Heather. He said, because it was like it all went away. And that's what he said. And it was. Mm-hmm. You've said that. Like, you were the one that got shunned and the one that caused the trouble, mm-hmm. even though it was the truth of what was going on. Mm-hmm. No, you were the one that was just causing issues and everything. Mm-hmm. So he said, I just thought that it was whatever it was had stopped. Mm-hmm. He said, and I never knew about you. And if I would have done something. And he was crying, and it was a sincere hurt. Right. Because he did not know, and he would have protected us, I feel like. Right. Or tried his best to do whatever he could. But he was still scared of our dad. Yeah. Just because of the manipulations that have happened over the years. Mm-hmm. He was still scared of him. So he would have stood up to him a little bit, but then it would have been just the same as we were. Yeah. We were controlled by him and the manipulations and everything like that. And
how did we overcome that, though? Because we got to a point that we just didn't care. Had we gone through so much that we snapped? Or I don't know. That's what I don't understand. We were controlled for so long. We were so scared. It was like, even if we talked to someone, we had to tell him everything that was said. Everything was micromanaged. It was like, oh, you should have said this.
He didn't do that
to
me all that time, like you did with you. Yeah. And I think it's because I wouldn't talk to him, and he made you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that right. you all had a different relationship than he and I did. Good, bad, and different. Period. It just was a different relationship. I didn't talk to hardly anybody. Like I would go in my room and just whatever.
We went from being like controlled and scared to looking at him and saying, you're going to quit lying about this.
Because we realized there was a lot more victims
Than just
not
us.
just him, like that he had done things to, but down the line, there had been other things that had been going on with the family, you know, and that's me. I mean, I can't speak for you, but that's what I'm saying. I think it is.
Right.
Is we realized, hey, you know what? Like there were other people that were going through things too.
Right.
And you and the things that you're doing could have caused a lot of this, contributed to a lot of it, not caused it, but contributed to a lot of what happened with other people.
Right.
And I think that might be part of it. And then I think too that we were just done. We realized that we were old enough to where we didn't have to be under his thumb. And if we didn't have a relationship with him, then so be it.
Yeah.
We were no longer lying about things.
Yeah.
It was, he couldn't control us anymore. He did not control us anymore.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know what? I'm done.
But there's so many people that will spend the rest of their lives scared of that parent.
Mm-hmm.
And even once they're married and have kids of their own, they still have that fear. And whatever they say to do, they're going to do it whether they're 50, 60 years old or not.
I think it's also because we found our strength at that time too, but we were also brought up to be strong people.
Right. So it turned on him.
It did.
The very thing that he instilled in us.
And
do what's right.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting ready.
Take up for the underdog. And
and
if someone's being bullied, you take up for them. Well, we were being bullied.
And I think that was it. Is we were like, we're done. I'm done. You know what? You've done all you can do to me.
And it could be that we still have, that we care more about other people and protecting other people sometimes than what we do ourselves.
And we were no longer living there.
Yeah.
That was a lot of it.
Right.
Mom couldn't do that.
Yeah, she couldn't.
Because she still lived there.
Right. She couldn't get out and see how dysfunctional things were because she was still in the dysfunction.
And she didn't think she would have anywhere else to go. She could have lived with either one of us had it come to that.
Right.
But in her mind, just the same as we were when we were still living in that situation, there was no alternative. There was no going anywhere else.
No,
it was not an option.
That's what was instilled in us. Is you can't make it without me.
Yeah. And if you go elsewhere, you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. You know what happens here.
I'm the only one that's able to protect you and provide for you.
And we realized it wasn't like that when we were outside of here.
Right.
So I think that was a lot of it too. And there were so many people and so many victims all along, and whether they were tied to him or not, or just was a trickle down effect or something like that, we finally were like, no, you're not doing this. And you're not going to be the one that runs the show. There's the cats again. And the one that runs the show anymore. We don't, and if that's how you choose to be, then that's fine. You can be that way, but we will not be here.
Right.
And I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do feel bad for those people who don't reach that point. Mm-hmm. Seriously, I'm not saying that they're weaker or, anything. Right. I don't mean that at all, because everybody deals with things totally differently. But I think that was the final straw. It's just everything coming out. And then trying to still feel like we were being lied to or trying to be manipulated and everything. We both were like, no, we're done.
Right.
We're done with this. Doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
Which is how we have gotten to where we are now and actually being able to talk about things openly. Mm-hmm. Because I can't even, I've said on here, 7-8 years ago, I would have never been able to sit here and talk about this stuff.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
I may have been able to talk about a few, like 2 or 3 episodes, and I'd have been done.
Right.
Because I wouldn't have had the rest of this stuff to talk about. Would have been off limits for me.
Right.
So, and I think what I still struggle with is the fact that after he did apologize and we forgave him while he was sick and everything like that, help take care of him. I honestly had forgiven him.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he was still here, would I still just feel love for him like I did? Or would this anger that I feel have come back like it does? And, and that's another thing. I'm like, how did I forgive him to just be able to move on and help out and everything like that and then pick it back up? But then again, at the same time, I'll never know that answer either because he's not here. So we can't see if he, like we've talked about before, if he really did make the changes that he was trying to make us feel like he was trying to be a completely different person.
I don't know that I ever loved him like a dad. I think I loved him as a person, how you're supposed to love someone.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I ever, even after,
I
don't know. Even when he died, it hurt. I mean, it was our dad.
Right.
But I don't know.
I have more of that nurturing to personality.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's not saying anything yay or nay about anybody, just a fact, period. I just do. And I think that's, I help take care of my grandmother, everything. And I'm not saying that for like a pat on my back or anything like that. That's just me. That's just how I do things.
Right.
And you weren't as much. Plus, you were in a different spot mentally at that time than I was too.
Mm-hmm.
You I'd had a lot of things happen, but you had a lot of things that were really deep, like taking care of me, thinking you were thinking you were protecting me and all of this stuff, and you realized that it wasn't all in vain. Yet at the same time, I kind of feel like that's what you felt,
Yeah.
And so that's a lot to deal with too.
Right.
I didn't have that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit easier for me to forgive and to help take care of him and Mom. And I think that was a lot of it too, was, we had gone down there with him. Me and my husband and Mom and Dad had gone down together the day before his surgery. And he had said, regardless of what happens, period, I just need to know that you're going to take care of your mom.
Right.
And we were in different times in our lives then too. You had little kids at that time. I didn't. I was able to be there with them for 9 weeks. And you weren't. You had a family here you had to take care of. You had kids here that had to be in school and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So circumstances made it easier for me to have to forgive and be there mentally, physically, versus how it might be now. If things had happened now, you might have been the one who had to be there and stay there, and see the differences and things that we were dealing with at that time with the sickness also made me realize that he was not mentally capable of being that manipulative person anymore after the surgery.
Right.
He wasn't.
Right.
And so it was almost like a very slow, just a totally different person who had to have help.
Right.
Who had like psychotic breaks when he was seeing things and hearing things and everything like that. And then I would have to stay in the room with him to kind of keep him grounded when he woke up, you know? Right. And so I think that that's why it was a little easier for me at that time to do what I had to do to make sure that he was okay and Mom was okay, because she wasn't mentally able to take care of all that either and to handle all that.
Right.
So I think that that was a lot of it too, was circumstantial.
Right.
So, I mean, you were there when you could be. And I think that might be why too, because I did. He was such a broken is not the word, but just a shell of the person that he used to be, basically.
Right.
Somebody who was almost reminded me of someone who had come back from a war
Mm-hmm.
and was just so mentally not with it,
Right.
and that's what I feel like.
Right.
So, anyway, I think that helped me then to be able to do what I had to do, also to make sure he was taken care of physically, but then also medically
Mm-hmm.
at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got back to the nursing home and everything too. So maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Possibly could have been that. Well, about to wrap it up today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we get to that point where you just like shut down. We
Yeah.
just shut down for the day. All right, well, we'll just wrap this one up for this week, and not really sure what next week will hold. It'll either be us or our cousin. So we won't say for sure because we never know for sure what's going to happen. But you all have a good week, and someone will be back on here next week. Bye.